Welcome, everyone. My name is Caitlin Choi, and I'm a work-based learning coordinator at Mesa College. I'm glad to be partnering up with Professor Don Berry on the STEM lecture series for today's event. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it today, but I am taking his place, so you can imagine me as Professor Don Berry. So this event is being recorded to share with those who are unable to join us synchronously. And also for those of you who are going to be writing up about this event, don't worry, Professor Don Berry will be sending the recording to you next week. And so we are grateful to have Kori Eliaz. She is a senior at Colorado State University, currently majoring in electrical engineering with a concentration in aerospace. Kori is a repeated intern at Lockheed Martin Space and recently accepted their offer to work full-time as a systems engineer upon her graduation in May 2022. So she started as a NASA embedded intern while attending community college in Orange County, and she spent over 9 months working on various projects and teams to develop flight software, avionics, and system models that support spacecraft from the Lucy probe to the Dragonfly mission. Kori started her educational journey at a community college, Saddleback College, where she had coursework in CS 1A through 1C that propelled her into her first internship with Lockheed Martin. And so Kori will be sharing her work on the NASA Lucy mission, as well as how they got started doing this work. And we'll have a Q&A with her before ending the event with a short survey for you to share your thoughts and comments. And so this time I'm going to stop sharing screen so she can have hers up. And I'm very pleased to be passing the mic on to Kori. All right, are you ready, Kori?
Yes, thank you, Catlin. Can everyone hear me? Awesome. Okay, I'm just going to share my screen really quick. Great. Okay. I'm just going to make sure I put all of you back here so I can see.
I love the picture, Kori. It gives me chills every time I look at it.
Awesome. Okay, well, I am going to get started. So thank you so much to everyone for making the time to come to this presentation. I am extremely excited to share my story with you. I was in your shoes. If you are a community college student here, I was in your shoes about 3 years ago. I went to Saddleback College and I actually spent about 3 years there. And it was during that time and taking my general education classes to become an engineering student at a 4-year that I was lucky enough to get involved with the Lucy mission. And that mission really just transformed my life. It brought me to a point now where I'm at a 4-year college. I'm at Colorado State University, like Catlin said. I am set to graduate in May with my bachelor's, and I will be returning to Lockheed Martin to work full time as a systems engineering associate. So without further ado, I'll get a little bit into my story. I'll talk about Lucy, and then I'll kind of talk about how those combine together and how I got to where I am today in my career and how you can follow in those footsteps as many others have before. So this is just a little bit about me recapping some of the things I talked about. On the left is a picture of me with the NCAS program, which is something I'll talk about a bit later. That's the first involvement that I ever had with NASA when I was a community college student. In the middle, that's me with the Lucy spacecraft, actually seeing it getting put together and tested at the high bay at Lockheed Martin in Denver, where I work. And then on the right is me with astronaut Kurt Brown. This is a scholarship. I was lucky enough to receive the astronaut scholarship as a result of all the work that I've been able to do for Lucy and similar missions. And it just kind of, it's cool to watch that trajectory of my life. Like, I don't really like talking about myself all that much, but it's really cool to see how this mission has really brought me through so many different stages. And it all started at Saddleback. So I was enrolled in CS 1A through 1C, Physics 4A 4B, Calc 3A 3C. Like I'm sure a lot of you here have been in some of those classes, and I really can't say that there's anything better. Honestly, the education that I got at community college was incredible. I felt very lucky to have been educated by professors who came from industry, who came from other institutions, and who gave me time to get to know them and to get to know my options. So that's a big difference. I think I'll get into a little bit more later. But I would definitely say to go full force with those classes. You will learn so much. And it was purely the information I got out of those general ed courses that landed me my first job. So definitely take those seriously. The 3 internships I did at Lockheed, I did flight software, I did hardware design, and then now I'm doing systems engineering, which is a totally different world. And I can talk more about that later as well. But I've kind of gotten to put my fingers into everything. And so all of the missions I've worked on have been deep space missions, just like Lucy, which I'll explain more later. I also transferred to Colorado State University in January of 2020. And as I mentioned, I'm a 2021 astronaut scholar. So that's just a quick recap of my life. But without further ado, I would really love to spend just a little bit of time talking about the Lucy mission and giving kind of a high level overview of what this incredible mission is. So I don't know if there's any way to engage everyone in the audience. I don't know if you can do like a thumbs up or something, but how many people have heard of the Lucy mission before today? Okay, so I can't totally tell, but I think not a whole lot. So that's great. So this is the first time. So Lucy is absolutely incredible. I'm just going to start from the beginning, and by the end, I hope that everyone has just a really deep appreciation of how cool this mission actually is. So when most people think about our solar system, they think of our planets, right? Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars in our inner solar system, and then Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune farther out. But in addition to just those planets, our solar system is filled with asteroids, and asteroids are a huge point of investigation right now in the NASA decadal survey, because asteroids are the fossils of our solar system. They are, by definition, rocky bodies that can range from the size of cars to the size of mountains. And they are the leftovers of planet formation, which preserves a record of what happened more than 4 billion years ago in our solar system. So while all of the different planets in our solar system have been forming, evolving, and changing, these asteroids have been floating basically untouched for the last 4 billion years. And so if we can investigate them with the kind of precision and fidelity that we have in technology today, we can really well understand how our solar system actually came to be. So in response to this, NASA has already sent Lucy, launched successfully this October. Actually, it was just a couple weeks ago. But Lucy is a mission to a never before explored group of these planetary fossils or asteroids, which is named for the famous fossil of our human ancestor that was discovered in Ethiopia in 1974. So the Australopithecus fossil that was discovered to understand our origins as humans, that's the namesake for this mission, which is being sent out into space to discover the origin of our solar system. And I really, really like this slide because there's a whole story behind this, and it's a really, really cool story. So a lot of our missions just have really interesting names. The PIs will come up with something cool. But as you can see, our mission patch is a diamond. And the reason for this is because the song that was playing at the after party when archaeologist Donald Johanson found the Lucy fossil was the Beatles' Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. So obviously, if we're going to name our spacecraft after this fossil, we're going to pay tribute to that by maybe making our patch in the shape of a diamond. And that's actually what my background is here too. So it's just a really cool fun fact, and I think a really cool way to tie all of this together. And then another thing on top of that too is that the Lucy mission was also loaded with a golden plaque that has bits and verses of the song. It has quotes from the different members of the Beatles, and it's being sent out there into space. So I think it's just a really cool record of all of the different things that make up STEM and STEAM together. So So anyway, back to the science objective of Lucy. The asteroids that Lucy is traveling to explore are the never before explored Trojan asteroids. So these are two groups of asteroids that are in the L4 and L5 Lagrange points, which are basically just huge centers of gravity around Jupiter where these asteroids kind of congregate. And so it will be headed out beyond the main asteroid belt to these swarms to understand more about how these came to be. And so we're not investigating all. Obviously, there's so many asteroids in each swarm. So we've picked 8 distinct candidates that we'll go through and explain why those are the candidates specifically that Lucy will be flying by to investigate. But before we discuss that, you might be asking, what are these Trojan asteroids really going to teach us, right? Like, we understand that these are fossils of our solar system. They've been there for a while. What can we really know? And so to understand why the Trojan asteroids are so scientifically interesting, we just need to take a little step back and talk about the concept of planet formation. So our solar system, right, we have 8 planets, 4 rocky planets and 4 gaseous planets. And all of these planets began to form in a gas-rich disk that surrounded our newborn sun 4.5 billion years ago. But inside that disk, early asteroids were forming as these planetary building blocks were hitting each other. Gravity was allowing all of them to stick together. And in this way, they grew into planets. And so these planets grew large enough that they could attract their massive gas-rich atmospheres. So Lucy's data will help scientists address questions like what rocky and icy materials make up these giant planets? How and where did these planets form? Did they move around? How did these materials for life make it to Earth? And are these materials for life present, perhaps on other planets, either in our solar system or others? Um, these massive hydrogen-rich atmospheres with pressures millions of times what we experience on Earth make it really hard to learn about the early solar system by sending probes to those planets. So it makes a lot more sense for us to send a probe out to do a flyby, or one day hopefully actually land, or if you've heard about OSIRIS-REx, taking an actual sample of an asteroid and returning it. That gives us a really good litmus for understanding what really happened 4.5 billion years ago to that piece of rock, rather than us trying to send a probe into the crushing atmosphere of a planet like Jupiter. Okay, so NASA is and has already launched a road trip. I just find it cool to say that because I've only ever given this presentation before it launched, and now it actually has. So I'm just like, it's actually out there. But we are going on a road trip to a record-breaking number of asteroids. So we've never actually been to this many before. We will be visiting 7 Trojans and 1 main belt asteroid. And so there are actually 6 main Trojan asteroids. There's actually one little secret satellite asteroid that was discovered a bit later that I'll talk about. No single spacecraft has ever visited this many objects on their own unique paths around the sun. And that's one of the coolest things about this mission, is the trajectory that we'll discuss a little bit later as well. For this trip, Lucy is going to travel almost 4 billion miles. That's more than 160,000 rotations around the Earth. So it's a crazy long journey. It's about 12 years. And breaking all kinds of records. It's definitely the most distance that a spacecraft has traveled on primary solar power. And then visiting all these asteroids, getting these kinds of scans and high fidelity information from these asteroids, which we've never done before. So traveling at 65 miles per hour, it would take almost 7,000 years to go on this kind of a trip. But luckily, Lucy will be traveling at an average speed of about 40,000 miles per hour, with a maximum speed at over 90,000 miles per hour. So it'll finish its trip, as I mentioned, in about 12 of our years. And Lucy has so many targets to visit. It has so much distance to cover. It doesn't have time or fuel to slow down or stop at any of these main targets. So it will be flying by each of the asteroids with a relative speed of about 9 to 20,000 miles per hour and taking scans while it's moving at that speed. Although the Lucy mission is 12 years long, most of the scientific data will be collected in the few hours when the spacecraft is closest to each target. And so that's another one of the really cool engineering feats behind this mission, is trying to figure out how to take data and then how to package that data and beam it back to Earth, because obviously the farther we go, the longer it takes to transmit that data back. and then to basically clear the cache and set it up for the next scan. So the reason why the relative speed between the targets and the spacecraft is so much slower than the absolute speed is because the targets are moving also very quickly as they orbit the sun. And that's just a cool fact about this. So what does the spacecraft really look like? This is a pretty good rendering generally of what it is, and you can see it's about 50 feet long. So to go on a trip like this, we really need power, and fuel is heavy and it's expensive, and we could do it a lot better with solar power. So the spacecraft has these two huge solar panels to power the spacecraft as it heads out past the orbit of Jupiter. And it breaks the record, as I mentioned, which was currently held by Juno as the farthest from the sun that a solar powered spacecraft has ever gone. Each solar panel is about 23.5 feet wide and has a total collecting area of about 51 meters squared. And then just for reference, the instrument panel here in the middle is about the size of a sports car. So if you were to look at the entire length of the spacecraft, it's about the length of a semi truck, and that's how big it is with its solar panels folded out. And that's also how big it is for reference. Those solar panels take up the majority of the actual size of the entire thing as well. So Lucy did launch from Cape Canaveral in the early morning hours of October 2021. It was October 16th at 5:34 a.m. It was a perfect launch. I was there. I have pictures. Everything went perfectly, and that cannot be said for a lot of launches. So I think there's some good juju behind this one, and I'm excited to see all of the science results that we get back. So Lucy's trajectory, as I mentioned before, is probably one of the most ingenious things that has ever really been designed. And so I really want to give credit to the person who almost single-handedly came up with this. It was an engineer named Brian Sutter, who actually works for Lockheed Martin. And he designed, with a lot of support, of course, but primarily was the designer for this trajectory, which basically is saying we're going to use two Earth gravity assists to get this solar powered spacecraft all the way from Earth out to Jupiter, come back to Earth, go back to Jupiter. And not only are we going to do that to complete our scientific objectives in the next 12 years, this spacecraft has enough power through those solar panels to actually do that for an infinite period. So Lucy could actually be rotating based on support from these Earth gravity assists between Earth and Jupiter for the next 10,000, 100,000 years. They've done analysis and they haven't found any particles or asteroids that we know of, that we track, that are in that trajectory for the next 10,000 years. So the record of our work as human beings, that all of these people all around the world came together to make this spacecraft, it will live on in our solar system basically forever. And to me, that's really one of the coolest things about this mission. So a lot of credit, I think, is due to the trajectory design here. But let's go back a little bit and explain actually what the plan is for the spacecraft. So it's launching on, it launched on an Atlas V, which is a relatively small rocket. So it starts out in an orbit pretty close to Earth's. It returns and flies by the Earth a year later. So in October 15th next year, it will fly by the Earth again. Lucy will use this flyby to gain speed through the Earth gravity assist maneuver, helping the spacecraft get more energy to head toward its more distant destinations. And next, oh, this is a cool fun fact, actually. Lucy will be the closest to Jupiter right before the first Earth flyby. So just based on distance alone, like that's how massive our solar system is. Just because we're going to Jupiter's orbit doesn't necessarily mean that we are as close at that point as we are now. So it isn't actually going to the planet, it's just going to certain points in the orbit that are different distances away. So back to the trajectory. After the second Earth flyby, Lucy will head out to the Trojan asteroid. So our second flyby is in December of 2024. And this will allow the spacecraft to gain the energy required to make it all the way to the first Lagrange point, which is the L4 swarm, and that's also called the Greek camp. So our first target of the 8 is a main belt asteroid named after the archaeologist who discovered the Lucy fossil originally, so Donald Johanson. It will do a quick flyby of this very, very small and relatively young asteroid as a dress rehearsal. So it's going to turn on all of its science instruments, and it's going to make sure that it can take proper scans, data being fed back to Earth correctly, any kind of telecommunication errors or telemetry issues can be ironed out, and we should be good to go for the main objectives, which we'll get to later. So this flyby is going to happen in April 2025. And then when that's all ironed out, in August of 2027, we will make it to our first official Trojan asteroid, which is called Euripides. And so remember that these are all named, asteroids often are named after Greek mythological characters. So these are maybe a little bit more complicated names than we're used to for some of the planets we've heard, but I will try to pronounce them correctly. So Euripides is the largest survivor of one of the only known big collisions in the Trojan swarms. And since we mentioned before, we don't have time to stop and take samples of these asteroids. We're flying by at about 9 to 20,000 miles per hour. All we can do is take scans. But we know that we have the instruments and the fidelity required to look and see what kind of materials are laying on the surface. And so that's what's interesting about Euripides, is since it survived this huge collision in the Trojan swarms, there is a high likelihood of some sort of mineral decomposition or rock leftovers from something that it collided with that we should be able to scan and understand and see what that really means and where that came from, the age of those rocks, the composition of those rocks. Are there potential for organic compounds on those rocks? So we should really, in essence, be able to look inside of an asteroid because of what's been deposited on the exterior from that collision. And then not super recently anymore, I think this was about a year and a half ago, we had this scan come back from Hubble, and scientists were debating because, and for reference, like this is the best image that we had of these asteroids that we still have actually, because we haven't been there yet. So we're going to go from this blurry thing that we can't make out. Even we had scientists fighting over what this little dot was for about 3 months before they finally decided it was another asteroid. We're going to get extremely high resolution scans of 8 of these guys. And that's just going to insanely change the way we view our solar system and the scientific knowledge that we have. So I think a year and a half ago around, we got the scan back, and so scientists were discussing what that dot that's rotating around Euripides really was. And it's hard to see because it's about 6,000 times fainter than the image of Euripides, leading scientists to estimate that it's probably less than half a mile across, which is really, really small for an asteroid, or a moon, I guess it could be called. But in this GIF, you can see how the satellite appears to the Hubble Space Telescope compared to a view where the satellite was too close to the primary asteroid to be visible. So we will be visiting through a flyby Euripides and the satellite and taking scans of both because we have the time and the space for that. And then about a couple months later, we will be visiting Polymele, which is the second Trojan asteroid, and it's going from one of the more interesting to one of the more small, so the smallest Trojan target that we have. So because it's less than a month away, and I mentioned before that one of the big issues with this whole thing is that since we're moving so fast, we really don't have time to stop and process. We just have to take data and go and process data on the way, and then make space for more data and keep going. So there's just really no stopping. And this one is a big issue actually, because the short interval between flybys, we take about 1.5 gigabytes of data, which is about the same as an hour of HTTP streaming, by the way. So that's how much data we get per asteroid. But to get the data back down to Earth, the spacecraft has to use its high gain antenna to send the data to the DSN, which is the Deep Space Network. And it'll take over a month to get all of the data transmitted just based on the distance that we have. So Lucy will fly by Polymele before it's gotten all of the Euripides data back to Earth. And so I actually remember being at work 3 years ago when I was working on Lucy and overhearing a conversation during a meeting about how are we going to compress data to make sure that we have space for polymerase data. And I just remember, hearing about that as a young student and like not knowing anything about what that really means, having not had an education, but realizing that these are serious implications that we have, where we make that connection between the scientific objectives and then the engineers on our side who actually have to discover how we can actually make that scientific objective happen. And so there are a lot of different ways to compress data. A lot of the stuff is, proprietary and not anything I can definitely go into, but it's just a cool consideration, I think. And it was kind of an aha moment for me at that point to hear the delineation between science and engineering at that point. And then another fun fact about data compression actually is that the entire flight software, so the entire image of the flight software written for the Lucy flight computer, is actually compressed into 4 megabytes. 4 megabytes is the same size as one MP3 song. So all of the code that was written to control the spacecraft is compressed into the same file size as one song, which I think is really incredible, and just kind of goes to show how cool it is that we can do all of this work. And it's just changed so much over the last 50 years, where we needed rooms of computers, and now we have one song's worth of code controlling this extremely complex spacecraft. So moving on, the third Trojan asteroid, the flyby will be in April 2028, and this asteroid is called Lucas. This is my favorite one. I don't know why. It's just kind of vague, and I think that's why it is. It's very long, which apparently is interesting to the scientists. I'm not sure why, but that's kind of why we're actually investigating it, is because it's long and because it's really slow on its rotation. It probably to them has an interesting history to give it its shape and spin, and so that's really the reason to visit this asteroid. Is just, why is it weird? So I'm really excited for April 2028 when we find out what is so interesting about Lucas. And then the fourth Trojan asteroid is probably the most exciting to most people. This is Oris, which is Lucy's reddest Trojan target. The reddest target makes it interesting because a red hue, not always, but can indicate the presence of complex organic molecules. So scientists are really interested in scanning Oris to see if there is a potential for the molecules that might make up life. And if so, that gives us a lot more reason to believe that we actually could find elements of life on either other planets in our system or in systems outside of ours. So after these, we will come back to Earth for our last course adjustment. So this is our third Earth flyby in December of 2030 on Christmas, if everything goes well. So that'll be cool. Lucy will be the first spacecraft to go out to the distance of Jupiter and then come back to near Earth. And the spacecraft will use the gravity of the Earth to do a small course correction to get it to the L5 swarm, which is at the other end, basically, of Jupiter's orbit. And these are the final targets in the L5 swarm. These are 2 for the price of 1. We have Patroclus and Menetius. And so this pair is so close together in orbit that if you stood on one, the other one would appear to be about 10 times the size of a full moon. So these are very, very closely linked together and are probably a primordial binary pair of asteroids, meaning that they have an orbit that goes around each other left over from the very beginning of our solar system. So the wonder there is, have they actually been a pair of binary asteroids for the last 4 billion years? And what do they have in common? What do they have different? So we, as you can see, we're picking very, very different asteroids. And probably at the beginning of this presentation, you're like, they're just rocks. But no, like they all have very different properties and are all of severe interest to us as people and to our scientists, especially to understand how our solar system came to be and how it's evolving. So now, after we've discussed all that, how are we actually going to get data? What are our instruments to get this information? So Lucy will only be able to fly by, as we mentioned, not touch or sample. So the spacecraft will carry different cameras to take photos and other data of the asteroids so that we can learn more about them. Lucy's 3 main science instruments are all related to cameras that have flown on previous missions. So the Lucy versions are named with the pseudo-French L apostrophe in the front to show that they are Lucy's. So we have La Lori and La Ralph and La Tez. In addition to these instruments, the T2 cam, which was also a derivation of the TT cam, which was on OSIRIS-REx before, will help the spacecraft navigate and do some science. And the high gain antenna is both responsible for allowing us to communicate with the spacecraft and for doing radio science experiments, such as determining the mass of these asteroids. So a little bit more detail about these. We have LORI, which is our high resolution black and white camera. And so this will take black and white photos of the asteroids. LORI is similar to the LORI camera that went to Pluto on the New Horizons mission and gave us back extremely high resolution photographs of the surface of that dwarf planet and its moons. And so this is an image of, this is a sample of one of the images we got back off of Pluto. And that's the kind of resolution we're going to get of our asteroids. And I don't know if you remember back to that slide a little bit ago of the Hubble image of our asteroid, which was just a white dot. So now, as you can see, we're going to get much, much higher resolution of these asteroids. And then we have LaRalph, which is an MVIC, and I always forget what an MVIC means. Okay, it's a multispectral visible imaging camera. So there's a lot of acronyms in this industry. If you aren't familiar yet, this is something we all have to figure out eventually. So this is our color camera, and it's really two instruments in one. So the MVIC camera has special filters to help determine what types of organic molecules might be on the surface of the Trojans. And this is what the Ralph camera saw when it flew on New Horizons, when it flew by a small object known as 2014 MU69. So this object is an asteroid-like object that scientific models suggest might be cousins of our Trojan asteroids. And this is the most distant object that we've ever seen up close. So these are the kinds of scans we're going to get through the Ralph color camera. And then we have LaRalph, which has a component called LISA, which is an infrared spectrometer. So this is an instrument that spreads out light to allow scientists to see the unique signatures of different ices that can occur on the surfaces of these asteroids. LISA also was deployed on New Horizons and was used to show that ammonia ice was revealed in this very recent crater on the surface of Charon, which is Pluto's biggest moon. And then we have LATES, last but not least, the infrared thermometer, which is going to allow Lucy to take the temperature of the Trojan asteroids remotely by measuring the amount of far infrared radiation that they emit. So since asteroids get all of their heat from the sun, their temperature tells us how they store the sun's heat, and from there what their surface composition is like. So this is what the OTES instrument saw on OSIRIS-REx when it arrived on the surface of Bennu, and will allow us to understand better what those minerals are on the surface of those asteroids and how they're being composed without actually having to sample them. So finally, just a reminder, right? This is a robotic unmanned spacecraft. There are no people going all the way to Jupiter for 12 years, luckily, but we had never even imagined something like this even coming about without the people behind this team. So I just really think it's an important point to bring about. Sometimes, you know, when we're sitting there in school and we're grinding away on our calculus homework, we kind of forget what the meaning of all of this is. And so I think it's just a cool reminder to know that you are going to be on teams no matter what industry you go into, but especially if you go into space, you're going to be on a team of exceptional scientists, managers, engineers, interns like me. Like, we're all on the same path to try to discover more about who we are as people and where we come from. So I think it's just a really cool reminder of all the cool stuff that people have done to make this mission possible. And as I mentioned, Lucy's mission will continue, right? So this trajectory is so genius that we will actually be able to keep harnessing the solar power that we generate through our solar panels, and we'll be able to continue harnessing the speed that we get from our Earth gravity assist to keep launching us back and forth between Earth and Jupiter for an indefinite period of time. So it'll serve as a reminder to us and to our future generations, and maybe if there is other life out there that finds Lucy one day, it will serve as a reminder of what we as humans have been able to accomplish together. And honestly, arguably one of the hardest times to even do anything, because we were in ATLO, which is basically the building and testing of the spacecraft, right when COVID started. And so we had to change the entire construction plan, the entire test plan. We had to put people on shifts. It was crazy. People were working nonstop to make this happen. And we made our original launch date and it launched perfectly. So I think this is a huge testament to what people can do when they're put in harsh situations. And it really keeps me going too, because COVID was crazy for me as a student, but seeing what these engineers and scientists were able to do to make these deadlines happen during all of that was really, really inspirational. And so as I've been saying, Lucy has launched. So this is the first time I have shown this slide ever. These are some of the launch photos that we had from a couple weeks ago. And this is out in the Cape. As you can see, when it was pitch black, right? It was 5:30 a.m. and it just lit up the sky. It was absolutely beautiful, super emotional, and a really, really, really cool experience. So I'm glad to report that Lucy has launched successfully. It's on its way on its 12-year mission to visit 8 asteroids, 1 spacecraft to rule them all. And if you want to know more, you can absolutely visit NASA's site. You can visit the SWIRI site for Lucy. And of course, you can always reach back out to me to learn more about Lucy as well. So I really hope that that was a good overview of the mission for those of you who hadn't heard it before, and even those of you who have, maybe you learned something new. And with that, I'm going to transition this presentation a little bit more to how I got involved with the Lucy mission and opportunities that were available to me that I didn't know about that I want to share with you so that you know how you can get involved in things like this. So hopefully I've inspired everyone here to work in the aerospace industry, because I mean, I'm biased, but I don't really think there's anything better that we could all be doing. It's just a really cool thing to do. So this is just kind of a lot of words. So ignore the words, just listen for a second, but making the most out of your community college experience. You know, a lot of times people maybe have, I don't want to say look down on you, but look differently at you, right? We're not at MIT. We're not at a 4-year, you know, we're at a community college. There's a ton of different reasons why we're all here. And for me, it was just the thing that happened in my life. I said, I don't want to be in high school anymore. I want to go to college, but I don't want to go to 4-year. I kind of just want to figure it out. And it was cheaper. And I'm so glad I did it. Honestly, I could not have imagined a better outcome. And so whatever your reasons are, it's the whole point of it is to make the most out of it, because you are going to a really good school. Honestly, Saddleback is one of the best schools I think in the world. And I could say the same for San Diego Mesa, because I've heard so many different things about that school that are just amazing, and people who have come out of that school who have similar trajectories to me too. But I think what the big takeaway of what I'm trying to say is that I want you to try to take advantage of these STEM courses. So these STEM courses you're taking are transferable for credit to most 4-year universities. If you take your CS classes, your physics classes, your calculus, and any other math classes, you will be able to get credit for those, but you're going to learn more than most 4-year students. And I know this from talking to hundreds of people on both sides and seeing how much of a lack that they have on the 4-year side when they take some of these courses, because they're sitting in a room of like 400 people. They never meet their professor, and it's just a whirlwind. Versus here, it's a lot more relaxed. You get to know your professor, class sizes are limited. And again, it's always about how much effort you're going to put into it, but you can extract more out of these classes than I think you could at a 4-year. That's just my opinion. And if you're looking for classes to take, definitely all the CS classes you can take. The C++ experience that you get from these courses, or even if you're taking Java, that experience is rare and invaluable. You will learn so much from those courses if you take advantage of the professor and make sure you go to office hours, pay attention to the homework. If you need to take the class multiple times, that's great, because you can do that at community college. You can just say, you know what, I think I need a break this semester. I really want to get it, but I don't want to spend thousands of dollars and like put myself through this whole stress, and I can do it here and I can do it better. Do whatever works for you, but just take advantage of that and know how useful those are, and also know how much those are going to service you in the future. Also, getting involved with clubs and honor societies or starting your own. These are some of the clubs that I looked at last year when I gave this presentation that were available at Saddleback. I'm sure there are more by now. But if you see, a roster of clubs and you don't see something that really pertains to you, it's so easy to start one. All you got to do is find a couple people who agree with you and a professor who supports you, and you can absolutely start a club. And I think that's one of the best things you can do at a 4-year or a community college, is because you can learn about different things that you may not get in a collegiate environment. You'll make connections with people that you absolutely will continue to talk to throughout your career. And it's just a good way to see what's out there in terms of projects and how you can apply the knowledge you're getting from class. So, building your resume, a lot of you have probably heard about resumes, right? They're kind of important when you're starting to look for jobs, or just having it in general. So, some tips I have for that are taking advantage of career fairs. There are internships at smaller or local engineering companies that you can get. You don't have to shoot for Boeing or SpaceX right away. Any experience is good experience. And I would highly recommend visiting career fairs or looking for jobs locally, talking to your professors. A lot of them work in industry, and asking them, hey, like, do you have opportunities for students? A lot of them will help you find them. So there are also ways to build your resume. A lot of people are always wondering, well, I don't have a job, or all the jobs I've ever had have been like retail or food service or something. That's fine. You don't need necessarily to be getting paid to do engineering. Maybe you join a free program such as NCAS or LSpace, which I'll talk a little bit about more, that can help you. And that's what I did. I didn't have any work experience at all when I got hired to Lockheed Martin for my first internship at all. I literally had been a tutor and like a babysitter. And then I had my CS classes, my physics classes, and my calculus classes, and I did this NASA program, and I had drive. And that's really what you need. Those are what you need to be successful. I don't care. Nobody can tell you otherwise, because I'm living proof of that. There are also NASA competitions you can join. So the MIDIC, the Big Idea Challenge, NASA Suits. It's really easy to find out about these. You can just Google NASA college competitions. They're open to students at any college in the US. You can form teams with people at your school. You can even form intercollegiate teams sometimes. Those are great ways to get visibility in the industry. And then self-learning. So if you ever find yourself wondering, I really wish I knew how to code in Python, and I can't take a class in it, there are websites you can visit. You can pay about $10 to $1,000 depending on how much intensity you want to give to that. So Udemy, Udacity, these are good sites for that. So I mentioned two programs before. The NCAS program is, I think, more applicable to everyone here because it's only for community college students. NCAS was the program that I joined that put me on the list, basically, to be successful in this industry, and gave me a foothold and gave me a reason to get involved. Before I did NCAS, I didn't really know that I was really capable of anything. Like, I sat there and I was like, yeah, I'm in school, I'm getting good grades, like, it's fun. I just don't really know what I want to do. I thought I wanted to build cars or motorcycles. I didn't really have like a plan. And then I found out about NCAS through talking to a professor at Saddleback College. And this changed my life. So I cannot recommend it more. It is totally free to you, except if you get accepted to the second stage, there's a $30 fee, which I promise is the best $30 you will ever spend in your life. But this is an opportunity to learn about NASA's research, about the work that goes on there, and then to actually go to a NASA center and participate in a competition, go to meetings with scientists and engineers who work for NASA, get tours, and be immersed for a few days in what it really means to be a part of the aerospace industry. All expenses paid. I know with COVID, they've changed things a little. So I know that there's more of a virtual program, but still getting a free virtual tour of an entire NASA center and getting to one-on-one connect with high-level engineers and scientists who are there for you, who share backgrounds with you. I mean, I can't tell you how many people I met who were like, I think it was the deputy director of NASA Ames Research Center went to community college. Like, you will meet people who have the most crazy titles and seem super intimidating, and you'll talk to them for a second and they're like the nicest person and they want you to be successful, and that just, it changes your life. I'm serious. So applications are not open quite yet for next year. I think the applications just closed for the spring. So please, please, please write down this link and pay attention to that. They will open applications again, and you can be any age. It doesn't matter. I think you just need to be like a US citizen or permanent resident, be attending a community college to be a part of this program. At the very least, you will get to do a 5-week online program, and you will learn all about NASA, and you will be able to write a proposal and write a technical document that's reviewed by NASA experts and gives you a little bit of background on what's going on at NASA and the different areas that they have. And then if you do well, you can be a part of the next step, which is absolutely incredible. And then, oh, these are just some pictures that I have from my time at NCAS. So this is just, we built Lego Mindstorms. I don't know if you've ever worked with Lego Mindstorms before, but these are really cool robotics kits. They're built by Lego, but they're kind of more of the Technic style. So they have more adjustable features, like you can adjust like frictional bearings and things like that to design robots, and they have sensors that you can do. And so you'll actually build one with your team, you'll code it like you can see in this picture to do certain things, and then you'll compete with other teams. And then interspersed between that competition are the tours. So we got to go to the VR, I think this is like the VR airplane training simulation that they have at Ames Research Center. And then there was also like a centrifuge and all these different cool things that we got to do while we were there. And then the other program that I mentioned was the L-Space program. So L-Space is the Lucy Student Pipeline Accelerator and Competency Enabler. And this program changed my life even more than the first one, but I only found out about it through NCAS actually. And so you can do these in either order, but just know that L-Space is open to all college students, whereas NCAS is only open to you as a community college student. And I wanted to share, and I was talking to Catlin about this earlier, that both of these programs are now actually keywords in searches for NASA opportunities. So if you have NCAS and L-Space on your resume, and you're applying for a NASA internship or job, they will actually single you out based on those keywords that you have in your resume. That's how special and that's how good these programs are. So highly recommend if you have time to do both or at least one. L-Space is different than NCAS, where it's completely virtual and it's always been virtual. You get put into teams up to, I think, 12 people across the country. And there's two sub programs. There's one where you write a PDR, which is a preliminary design review. It's a huge document that's basically a full plan of some sort of design in response to a solicitation that they'll give to you. So when I did this program, my solicitation was to design a small ballistic probe to land on Mars and search for water. So you get that, and then you'll have these really great Zoom calls every week with some scientist or engineer from the aerospace industry who will give you a perspective into their career and then some insights into how you can better your document with your team. You'll learn how to remotely collaborate. You'll learn how to be a part of a real team. You'll learn how to take having no experience between all of you and being at the end of 3 months able to come up with a huge document that explains exactly how you're going to design the spacecraft to accomplish NASA's goals. And it happens every time. And those skills are what you're going to need to be successful in the industry. The other program that L-Space does is a proposal writing academy, which is where there's actually 10,000 real dollars on the line that you will get together with a team and you will come up with some sort of concept to target one of NASA's pain points and come up with a solution with them. You'll design it and you'll write a short proposal with a budget and a risk matrix and all of these important things. You'll pitch that, and then you'll evaluate other people's proposals. And that is actually one of the most unique things about this program, because most of us, even if we get to really crazy points in our careers, don't ever actually evaluate other proposals. We only ever write them. So being able to write one and then evaluate several others is a absolutely life-changing, career-changing experience. And then they have been awarding multiple actually over the last few times I've seen. Normally they would only award one team, but now they've been awarding like 2 or 3. So the likelihood of getting this 10,000 to really go out there and make your product real is high. And I was on a winning team when I did this project, and it was life changing. And I know I say that a lot, but literally, I would not be here talking to you all today if it wasn't for these 2 programs. And I wouldn't have had my internship with Lockheed if I didn't join LSpace, because LSpace offers unique internship opportunities. So once you complete one of the 2 academies, you are eligible to participate in internships with NASA, Lockheed Martin occasionally. There's Kinetics, SWIRI, and other groups that they partner with. So these are some pictures of some of the artifacts that we created through the LSpace program. We've made quad charts, made Gantt charts, risk matrices, designed items in CAD. And then in the middle is something called JMARS, which is a planetary GIS that was designed to help basically stitch all the images we have of the Martian surface together and do analysis. And we learned how to use all of that and build all of that in only 3 months. Okay. So I've been talking a lot. I apologize. So I'm just going to speed through this real quick, and then I'm going to open it up for questions. But I just wanted to briefly go over some of the experiences that are available in industry. Aerospace is a huge field, and I like to say the place for you is space, or there's a place for you in space, or I'm trying to rhyme place in space. But anyway, there's a place for you in space. There's a place for everyone in space. Aerospace is the future, right? We've been on Earth for a long time, and we've done a lot of crummy things to our planet, and we're working on it, but the future is out there, and we need to keep exploring if we're going to keep breaking boundaries. So there's so many innovations that come out of the aerospace industry that benefit life back here on Earth for us, but also make it possible for us to sustain, right? Because we need to keep going. So if you're interested in aerospace, obviously there's engineering roles, right? We always need people to come and realize the scientists' dreams and build them into real concepts, right? So we have systems, software, hardware, RF, structures, propulsion, blah, blah, blah. The list goes on. Anything you would want to build or do, there's a job. Obviously, you could be a scientist. And then there's other things. So if you're in community college and you're majoring in zoology, I guarantee you there's a job for you in aerospace. All you got to do is join these programs, express your interests, and you will find it. And that's what I did. I just said, I really like taking stuff apart and seeing what happens and licking batteries. And I also like rockets. So what do I do? And that's how I kind of found my spot. And over time, you refine that for yourself. But number one thing I would recommend if you want to be a part of this industry is to start building programming experience. Programming is becoming so important. We use computers to do literally everything. It doesn't matter what you do. So definitely C or C++, I think, is preferred because you have that upper hand that you're learning a lower language, and you can learn how to use embedded systems and microprocessors. And those are all really important. Scripting is really important. So taking the time to take a class in something like Python will strongly benefit you in the long run. And then any data processing languages like MATLAB are also extremely helpful. And there are classes for all of that, I think, at Saddleback and San Diego Mesa. Learning how to use CAD is a great skill. Learning how to use Google. I literally sit at work with 2 monitors, and I have my work on one monitor and Google on the other. And I'm not kidding. That's how I got through 3 summers and how I got hired now, because I know how to Google, because you can't be asking people questions all the time. You kind of have to just figure it out sometimes, and Google will help you. So spending some time trying to understand how to look things up and actually joining these programs that I mentioned, you will be Googling a lot because you won't know anything in the beginning. And by the end, you'll have so many technical papers that you found and have read that you're like an expert. And that's basically all we can do, right? So last but not least, interpersonal communication is huge. EI, which is emotional intelligence, is much more hireable than IQ, right? And EI is something we can all build. So spend that time getting in clubs, spend that time breaking your comfort zone, talking to your professor, talking to your teammates, learning how to be a communicator, learning how to express your ideas in a way that everyone can understand. that will get you not only through the interview, it will get you the job, and it will get you any job, because if you can express what you want and what you bring to the table, that's more valuable than someone who knows how to do like crazy math in their head and can't ever say to anyone what they actually did. So just keep that in mind. Okay, and then just a quick plug. I work for Lockheed Martin. Lockheed Martin built Lucy. We designed, built, and flew Lucy, and we are now fixing the solar panel issue, which was not our fault. So I just wanted to give a quick shout out though. I do a lot of outreach for Lockheed Martin, and I stayed with Lockheed Martin for 3 years for a reason. I mean, we have been an integral role. We have been on every Mars mission. We have built the heat shield for every single mission to Mars ever. We're currently flying 7 spacecraft out of the Denver mission support area, and we will continue to do that. We have interns to senior managers working together to meet critical deadlines. I mentioned before we were building Lucy and testing Lucy during COVID. That was done at Lockheed Martin by Lockheed Martin engineers. Brian Sutter, who designed this incredible trajectory that made everybody gasp, is a Lockheed Martin engineer. So if you're interested in pursuing a future with Lockheed Martin, or maybe you didn't know that we had so much to do with deep space, please go out there and tell people. That's what we do. We really do. I mean, we save our country in a lot of different ways, and then we also work on these cool deep space missions. So we're a very diverse company, and if you're interested in opportunities, we are actually actively hiring 2-year graduates. So if you have an associate's degree from a community college and you're looking for a role, you may be eligible for a position at Lockheed Martin. So please take down the link and check it out if you would like to know more. And you can also follow LM Careers on Instagram to see more of those things. And I actually will be there sometimes. So you might see me on their Instagram too. This is just some interview tips, not super important, but you'll learn more about this later, and I think these slides can be handed out. And then lastly, I'm done. Please contact me anytime. This is all of my contact options. I don't care if you call me in the middle of the night. I am personally invested in bringing more incredible people into this industry. I'm so thankful that you're all here. And if you'd love to connect on LinkedIn, I'd love to talk. If you want to follow me on my Instagram, you can text me, you can email me. I am always here to help. And with that, I am done talking. Thank you, Catlin. And I am happy to take questions from anyone.
Thank you so much, Kori. I always enjoy your presentation. It's so awesome. And I want to just do a little bit of a time check. We got about 2 minutes left before 5 p.m. And so I just want to thank you, Kori, so much for coming and sharing about NASA Lucy mission and your experiences and tips for success in the aerospace industry with us. Let's drop some love and appreciation in the chat for Kori. And I noticed that we got a question from Charles in the chat. So if Kori has time to, after this, to stay on a little bit longer and answer questions from students, that would be amazing.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you, Kori. And so I want to say thank you everyone for attending. Please fill out our event survey and give us feedback for the event. It's tinyurl.com at Lucy /Lucy mission. Actually, let me share screen on that so that way you can see. And then our next STEM lecture series event will be on Tuesday, November 16th at 7 p.m., highlighting research internship opportunities for community college students through the UCSD GeoPaths program. So stay tuned for the Zoom info during campus-wide email. And so for those of you who have questions, please stick around. I really appreciate you being here today on a Friday afternoon. So thank you so much for everyone else who can't for coming. So I see Chad, you also have a hands up. So let me, okay, you got a couple of comments you want to make. So let me, oh, thank you, Charles. I think you had a question in the chat. So if we can address Charles' question first, and then we'll go to Chad, if that's okay.
Okay, great. Hi, I can talk, I can.
Yes, you can.
Oh, okay, oh, hi. First of all, thanks for bringing up the professional emails. I teach English writing, so it's glad that's really nice to hear that from somebody and you know, out in working as a scientist. My question was, Do the asteroids have atmospheres?
I don't think they're large enough to
Oh.
amass that. I mean, I'm sure, I think at a certain point we delineate between an asteroid and a planet based on that criteria. And I don't know exactly, I'm not a planetary scientist, but I don't think so.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Chad, you had your hand up. Would you like to share?
Yeah, I could actually answer that question for
Oh,
Charles.
thank you.
I don't think they don't. Some that are like near the planets would have an atmosphere. There was like Ganymede is actually, they think it has an atmosphere. That's one of Jupiter's moons. But if they're not near enough to a planet, it seems that they don't develop an atmosphere, because you're really going to get an atmosphere when you have internal heat. And these are too far out away from the planets to have any internal heat, most of them. And so there's no tidal, gravity forces that would cause any heat, which would develop into, atmosphere conditions. So most of these are pretty much frozen because of their distance from planets that are, like Jupiter or Saturn or any of those out there.
So would Mercury have to have more of a satellite, an atmosphere than say Neptune or Uranus?
Mercury doesn't have an atmosphere either. Neither does Mars. Has a very limited one, even though it's a planet. That's in our inner solar system. This is just from what I know. I study, astronomy now, but I'm hoping to become an astrophysicist. But what was the last part of the question that you said about Mercury?
Oh, it wouldn't. I thought because it's closer to the sun, it wouldn't need an atmosphere. It's the heat the planet has itself.
Yeah, but there's also, it's the internal that generally makes an atmosphere. But with Mercury, though, it's just so close. I don't think that it hasn't developed one that I know of. It's that's a little different. But from what I know for sure, Mercury doesn't have an atmosphere. I think it might be because it's actually too close. But
Thank you.
Yeah, that's just from what I know, the little bit that I've been studying. But there's a lot of moons that are trapped asteroids. Some, they think Ganymede might have been a planet itself at one point and developed an atmosphere, but it's it's a larger moon of Jupiter. I've just been studying this stuff just recently, so I'm learning a
Why
little
did
bit.
Pluto get downgraded from a planet?
Oh, Pluto, they think, well, there's certain limitations, it's got to be able to clear its own orbit, which is one thing, it has to not have anything in its way, but it's actually in the same, it's going to hit Neptune, they think, at one point. So it's a minor planet, really. There's a bunch of them, I think Eris is another one, and there's a bunch out there. They're just, they have different means of designating them now, which is kind of why it was dropped back. But it kind of, it's still, they still talk about it. I mean, there's moons that are just as large as Pluto that are around Jupiter and Saturn, I think, that are just about as big as those. So, it's kind of just the way they designate them right now.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can I ask one other question?
If I could answer,
when a rocket,
yeah, go ahead.
Also, when something's travel like a rocket's in space, once it gets going, is that Newton's law, like an object in motion remain in motion? But actually, it could just keep going.
Yeah, there's
nothing gonna.
There's no resistance in space, supposedly. I mean, there's gravitational.
Oh yeah, unless it runs into.
The gravities of different planets, and Ganymede is bigger than our moon, I believe. And Rodney had a question about that.
I'm sorry.
It's about as big as Mercury. It's just about the same size as Mercury, Callisto and Ganymede. But actually, my question to Kori, I wanted to get back to you. Sorry, Charles.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
I answered that for you. I was wondering, for what I study more is on the theoretical side of physics and that kind of thing. I'm not really into the engineering aspects, but is there space within these internships for people like myself? I haven't had enough time to take the math to get me through to the physics classes even though I studied it on my own, for many years. But is there like on that theoretical side, as like a
Yeah.
research scientist, is that available still?
Absolutely. And I think Catlin mentioned there was a presentation coming next week about research opportunities like as internships, but I know obviously at NASA, right, we have both sides of that, the scientists and the engineers. So there are tons of science internships at NASA that you can be involved in. And I have a lot of friends of mine who are planetary science majors or astrophysics majors who intern at NASA. At Lockheed Martin, I think we have like 3 scientists. We're more of the kind of the design, build, fly folks. So maybe not so much on our side, but definitely NASA institutions like the Southwest Research Institute, which was a huge part. Actually, our PI for Lucy is from SWIRI. So that's definitely somewhere to look into. Yeah. And then I'm sure there are a ton more. It's not, like you said, totally my area of expertise, but those 2 for sure, I know you can do some really cool stuff in internships with them from an early point, I think, in your career, more with NASA, for sure. Yeah.
Good. Excellent. Thank you. Yeah, this was a great presentation too. I really enjoyed it. It's
I'm
like,
glad. Thank you.
it's right what kind of what we're studying right now. I'm not sure though, is the Kuiper Belt, is that what this is, the Trojan area, or is the Kuiper Belt beyond the Trojan?
The Kuiper Belt is out near Pluto, so it's similar. There's some relationships between them, but they're not the same area.
I got you. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
What happened with the Van Allen belt? Wasn't that something that would be hard to pass through?
Yeah, so there's a high amount of radiation there, and so that is actually part of the requirements that we plan for. We have radiation shielding on all of our electronic components, and we've dealt with it enough times, but it's more of an issue when you actually stay in orbit around Earth versus actually passing through it is not so bad since it's temporary.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I think, Christian, you have a question?
Hi, Kori. First, thank you so much for the presentation. I really appreciate that. So my question, rather than being about space, would be about your kind of like a path to transfer. So you said you're studying at what university, sorry?
I study at Colorado State University.
Colorado State University, and it's electrical engineering, right?
Yes, so that I'm majoring in electrical engineering right now.
Great. So when you were at the community college, did you finish your general education?
So I was on the plan to the IGETC. So I was planning to go to like any of the UCs, honestly. But I ended up moving to Denver for my internship and then ended up just staying in Colorado. So I hadn't actually finished my general ed. I think I was about a year away from finishing. And it was more classes like differential equations I hadn't taken yet. But I had taken 3 out of 4 CS classes. And I definitely think that those are, in terms of coursework, the most valuable since I got hired for a flight software internship and they were using C++, which is what I learned. So, yeah.
Oh, okay, I understand that. Okay, yeah. So your general education classes were not necessary to transfer.
The intention was originally to transfer. I didn't know that I was going to get that job. I literally just started joining these programs and I had to take a leave for a few months because a friend basically got sick and I had to leave my home and all that stuff. And so in that time joining these programs, and I said, I'm just going to apply for this internship and see what happens. And because of the experience that I had taking these classes at Saddleback, and because of the programs that I told you about that I had been involved in, I was picked to go do that. So my life just kind of started leading me at that point. I said, okay, I'm going to Denver for 3 months to work anyway. I might as well look into transferring to Colorado.
Wow. Okay. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your answer. Thank you.
Absolutely. Sure.
Bye.
Any other questions? This is so great. I love the shared teaching moments here where we're crowdsourcing for answers. Chad, you have another hand
And I'll
up.
ask another question. Actually, I was kind of curious about whether you guys have identified any heat sources within any of these asteroids, because I know that they use like craters. If the asteroids have a lot of craters, it basically would show that there hasn't been any heat source to cover them, you know, with any kind of planetary or not planet, but you know, like volcanoes would cover up some of the craters that would show that there's a heat source.
Mm-hmm.
And the more craters that are on each asteroid shows that there basically isn't any heat sources. I mean, that's something that they've already identified through what, the Juno mission or Osiris, or what was?
So Juno actually, the whole objective of Juno was just to travel to Jupiter and scan Jupiter. So we didn't really do any asteroid scanning. The most recent asteroid specific mission has been OSIRIS-REx, and that's been Bennu specifically to get to Bennu and take that sample. And that sample is actually now on its way back here to land in 2023 for investigation. So we haven't really done that many asteroid missions yet. And so all of these asteroids we're visiting, we really don't have a whole lot of information on them. We just know generally what makes them interesting. We have some images, and they're, as you saw, really low quality. So that's the plan, is right, with these instruments, is to take those thermal scans to scan for craters. What is the composition of those craters? How old are they? What kind of ice is in the craters? Those are the questions we're hoping to answer through this mission in particular.
Have you guys thought about leaving a probe out there that would just keep bringing us data, or is it not possible to put it in the same orbit as those?
So, I mean, it is going to keep, like I mentioned, it will go onwards forever. And that is something that I really think is cool about Lockheed Martin, is that we have literally resuscitated spacecraft at one point. Our Stardust mission from the 90s, it was done, and we just left it in space. And then a year and a half later, NASA's like, hey, can you turn it back on and do more science? And we were like, sure. And we did successfully. So I'm going to preemptively answer your question and say I wouldn't be surprised if we rerouted the spacecraft to take better or more scans later. It's just not in the primary mission plan.
But they haven't done anything in the sense of like putting something within the same, the Trojan, you know, like their the revolutionary pattern or whatever, and just leaving it there? Or would
Well,
that
I mean,
be?
it is going to keep traveling, so it's already on that trajectory, but we haven't made plans to visit anything after the 12-year mission plan. So it's after we complete those objectives, then we would petition to NASA to continue and give them a plan for, hey, we want to visit asteroid X, Y, and Z. We're already on the way. Can we do that? And
Right.
we would go through that whole process again. But we've done it so many times, and we've been successful with so many different spacecraft that I would not be surprised if we did. It's just that it's not in the plan yet.
Okay, understood.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, good question.
Okay, anyone else? Thank you so much for sharing again, going past our time of 5 o'clock. Kori, again, thank you so much for sharing and staying with us extra. So enjoy your rest of the afternoon or evening, really, on Friday. And stay tuned for the next STEM lecture series on the 16th. Featuring the research opportunities available for students through internship at UCSD. That'll be sent out through a campus-wide email. Happy Friday, and see you next time. Bye, everyone.
Awesome.
Thank you so much. Thank
Bye.
you, Kori. Okay, take care, Kori. Bye-bye.
Bye.